All right, so Rhett was here with us a year ago. We had a wonderful conversation, and we're going to start seeing his incredible photos from all over the world of nature, animals, plants, and I've heard the majority are brand new from your adventures. So thank you for joining us. Would you just, for those who weren't here last year, just briefly, the founding story, pretty much straight out of college, you decided to found Mongabay. How did that happen, and where have we come to now?
Yeah, well, Mongabay was really born out of my interest as a child in interesting animals. And then a few things happened to me. I went to forests that were subsequently destroyed, and I decided in college to write a book about rainforests. And so that was the origin of the text. And instead of making a textbook, I decided to put it on the internet so people could read it for free. I thought I was going to go into finance, but I had this website, it grew popular, and then eventually I decided to quit my real job and do Mongabay full time. So that's where it came from, and that was 1999.
Fantastic. So when you were here a year ago, you talked about some trends in reporting about the state of nature. Are there some things that have fallen away, some topics that have fallen away, and some trends that are growing? What's been the shift in the last year?
Yeah, so there's definitely been a lot of building on some of those trends. So one, which I think has come out here, it's very obvious here, is that there's a lot of interest in addressing climate change, but also biodiversity loss. So I feel like biodiversity is sort of becoming more of something more mainstream and something that companies are actually thinking about. It used to be very niche. So that's kind of like one macro trend. Another is just the recognition of the role that indigenous and local communities play in achieving both conservation outcomes, but also addressing climate change. And so there's been sort of this watershed moment in the conservation space where there's just a huge amount of recognition going into it. Now, whether that leads to implementation, that's happening now. But there was a report that came out this week which showed that 103 million hectares, which is 250 million acres, have been recognized with indigenous and local people land tenure in the past 5 years. So that's a kind of a big development. And I guess the other thing is that we're not out of the woods yet. We can see the impacts of climate change getting worse, so attribution is getting stronger, but more and more people are also aware of what's happening. And so I think from making a case to the public and building a constituency, that's really important. But at the same time, there's sort of this backlash by kind of business as usual. So we know about climate trolls, but then also just threats against environmental defenders around the world. So that's not going away. I would say it's as bad as it was a year ago.
How many people do you have out there doing the stories for Mongabay around the world, and where are they?
So we have about 1,000 contributing journalists in about 75 countries, and then we have about 85 staff in about 25 countries. And so we have most of our contributors are in the global south. So they're in the biodiversity hotspots, which are have the most to lose in terms of biodiversity, but are also feeling the effects the most and are often sort of have the least resources to deal with these challenges. So, we try to operate in places where we feel like we can have significant impact, through our journalism.
What are some big stories that have come out recently that we might have missed that we should know about?
So there's a couple macro issues that are really important. So one is the impact of extractive industries. Mm-hmm. So this is something that Mongabay reports on a lot, but there's been a resurgence in coal, which is kind of surprising. I mean, we thought coal was sort of dying or dead, but coal production demand is going to hit, I think, a record this year. So it's not going away. I mean, if we're looking at the long term, it's shifting, but there's still a lot coming out of the ground. And the process of bringing it out of the ground, has a lot of impacts on communities, the environment. And coal is just one of many extractive industries. So, there's the whole impact of a lot of the rare earth metals and things like nickel, which are going to EV batteries. And so we really have to think about the whole supply chain of what it means. So it's not just carbon emissions, it's also what's happening on the ground. So the other story to sort of watch, which is going to be really important this year, is El Nino. So we don't know how strong it's going to be, but El Nino in the past has sort of given us a sort of a taste of what climate change could look like in the future. And the last major El Nino event was almost 10 years ago. And if people don't remember, there were huge forest fires around the world, but especially in Indonesia and in the Amazon. Mm-hmm. And so Indonesia has been talking about how they've had this great reduction in deforestation. But the reality is they haven't had a strong El Nino since 2015, 2016. So we can't really say whether the policy is working or not. So this is going to be the real test of sort of all the policies that have been implemented. So those are some two big issue areas that I think we need to really focus on.
So in addition to your reporting, you just co-authored an academic review on trends in forest conservation. So what are some of the key takeaways from that academic review of the state of forests and protecting our forests?
Yeah, so one of the big trends is just the rise of technology and how that's greatly improved our understanding of what's happening in the world. So that's forests, but it's also oceans. So I mean, I say this all the time, but we no longer have ignorance as an excuse because we know what's happening. So that's gone out the window. And so with forests, like we can see in near real time, what's happening to these forests, not only deforestation, but also degradation now. So that's basically created this enabling environment for all sorts of actors. And so sort of, in that vein, there's also been this broadening of the sort of conservation constituency. So it used to just be mostly NGOs, governments, and the forest sector who were sort of most interested in forests. But now it's just a wide range of society that's interested. And so it's created all these new opportunities for collaboration. And that's true with oceans as well. So it's a very positive development, I would say. Another big thing is Indigenous and local communities. So again, we've already said this, but this recognition of the role that Indigenous and local communities play to achieve these outcomes, and there's actually money flowing into the space now. Again, there's still a long way to go, but it's led to this kind of reckoning within the conservation sector broadly. And then I guess the last thing is how forest conservation is being communicated. So it's less of a niche issue and becoming so more of the conversations are around not just carbon, but public health, biodiversity, and sort of the other benefits all the co-benefits that come from protecting forests. And that's also true with oceans. So again, it's about building like a bigger constituency to protect the planet essentially. And so again, I think that's a very important macro issue that we should all sort of take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned some partnerships in forests and in oceans. Can you give us just an example or two?
Yeah, I mean, so in the forest space, a really important partnership has been the development of this platform called Global Forest Watch. And so it's managed by the World Resources Institute, but it brings together probably around 100 different partners. And essentially what it is, it's a map of the world which has all sorts of forest data on it. I mean, Mongabay has a story layer, but it has biodiversity, it has carbon, and Planet, which is a satellite company, is putting their near real-time imagery there. And what that's done is it created this incredible platform for people to engage around and drive, conservation action, but also zero deforestation commitments from companies. And so the same thing's now being done with oceans with Global Fishing Watch. And so these kind of collaborative platforms are really an important way to sort of make progress in a broad range of areas.
Right, and really be a reality check for those claims that, are those products from those companies really net zero deforestation? They're not leading to deforestation because we know where those commodities are being grown. We know the company and we can see it thanks to this collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. And so with oceans, it's really important because there's just so much illegal fishing and other activities. Mm-hmm. And so we did a big investigation into a tuna fishing fleet, a Chinese tuna fishing fleet. And we found, it was a very long investigation, but there was a lot of slave labor in this fleet. Then we also found that the tuna fishing was actually a cover for shark finning. And it was something like 30 times the amount of shark finning that was like previously reported was done by this fleet, this like dark fleet. And so there's all sorts of tools now that go beyond just sort of the AIS systems that are on boats. I mean, you can monitor boats by satellite and these other systems. So again, the transparency is getting better and better on this front.
So pretty devastating stories that you're reporting on, and also some hope with some of these new partnerships. Maybe could you share a little bit more on the hope side of things? You guys are at turning 25 this year or next year. So what's something hopefully you can leave us with, and what does the future look like for Mongabay? I mean, what I love is I go to Mongabay and the articles, the stories are so in depth, directly from the ground, really learning what's happening. And no matter what you care about, what place you care about, you can get incredibly high quality information. And it is a mix of, there's a lot of bad news and there's some really exciting solutions on there. And so maybe kind of taking us forward to the next session around a solution or something that gives you some hope, and the future of Mongabay, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, so the future of Mongabay, I think is, we have a lot of ambition. And so I guess like three of the main priorities for us are continuing to expand in places where we think our journalism can have impact. And so that means over the next I mean, it's a 2030 plan, building out some of these key geographies. So later this year, we're planning to spin out our Africa team into their own bureau. So we'll have Mongabay Africa. And what that will do is it'll create this infrastructure which will allow us to scale our presence in Africa much more significantly. So getting more reporting, engaging more journalists, and just getting the stories out there. Another priority for us is audience expansion. So our monthly readership on the website is 3 to 4 million people, and then we have much larger reach through the outlets that syndicate our stories. But we'd like to further expand that beyond sort of our core audience of key decision makers. And some of the ways for doing that in certain countries is we think through short form media. So we're already doing video, but really doing short form content and then working with local partners to have it adapted into locally relevant languages.
Great.
So that's a big thing for us. And then also helping build capacity in some of these biodiversity hotspots where there are not that many opportunities for environmental journalism. So we've launched a fellowship program, and so that's really important to have people on nature's front lines who are able to do this reporting and have the resources to do so. So in terms of hope, I mean, I think it really comes out through this, through this event. I mean, there's been so many hopeful, presentations so far. My focus is on Mongabay's focus is on the intersection of nature, and communities essentially. And so I would sort of double down on the nature-based solutions. So there's so many opportunities to pursue nature-based solutions that engage local communities, indigenous peoples around, conservation. So, some of the most obvious ones are, like mangroves, forests, and seagrass. So there's a lot more intention in these areas, but sequestering a lot of carbon and then all the co-benefits. And so I think there's just a lot to get excited about in that space, and so many solutions embodied in that topic.
And what mangroves and seagrass can do for us, from carbon, from biodiversity, from fisheries, from habitat. The power of nature. We kind of say nature is the best investment when it comes to solving climate change, but more broadly for the planet and for everyone we're sharing it with. And those of you who know me know that my mom is a nature educator. She's in second row and taught me to fall in love with nature. And so I love having this conversation with Rhett every year. And I'm so grateful for the work that you do, and that you started this, and that you are growing rapidly. And welcome everybody to meet Rhett while he's here for the next few days and help to support and grow Mongabay, which is a nonprofit. So thank you for joining me and thanking Rhett.